Hey YouTube, Woodworker Anonymous here. This is my DIY wrench rack, and I know what you're thinking. You're like, really? The best DIY wrench rack? Well, yeah, and it is, and I'm going to tell you why. Okay, so first, this is a modular tool system that uses magnets. It's got on the back embedded magnets, bar magnets, top and bottom. That's what actually holds these wrenches in place. And it has these two cup magnets. And these cup magnets are what hold the entire rack onto your toolbox or the underside of your car if you want. But why? Why is this the best wrench rack? There are a couple different scenarios where this thing really hits its stride. Let me show you what I mean. So what's nice about this modular type tool tray, they can all be slapped up right on the outside of the metal toolbox instead of inside these drawers. Okay, here's your typical toolbox tool drawer, and most people have their sockets and their wrenches, their organizers in the drawer, okay? But you don't work in your drawer. You work at the workbench, or you work, next to the bike. Most of the wrench racks that are in these type of drawers, the rack stays in the drawer. So you either got to take one tool at a time, or you got to grab multiple tools and carry them in your hand and then put them down at the job site. What's different about this modular type system is it sits nicely in the drawer. The magnets keep it stuck to the bottom of the drawer so they don't slide around when you open and close the drawer. But let's say I want to go down to the shed and work on my bicycle or the lawnmower, and I'm not sure which wrench I need. Well, you can just pick up the whole rack and take it with you. And these things aren't going to fall out. They're nice and secure. And I just carry it with me. Bring it back when you're done and just put the whole thing back in your drawer. But let me tell you something. I don't even like putting them in the drawer. I like putting all my tools right here. And the reason is when I'm working on my motorcycle right here, the tools are right here. The sockets are here. The Allens are here. The wrenches are here. Anything that I want or need a lot of access to is right there. It's super easy to have and see exactly which tool you're looking for. If you want the 10 millimeter or you want the 5/8 inch wrench, whatever it is, you can spot it and almost instantly and reach over and it just comes right off, just that simple. And when it goes back, it just pops back in there and it's always there. It's right there. Okay, so this modular tool system on the outside of your toolbox, it just made this little toolbox a much bigger toolbox. I can carry so much more stuff in these drawers when it's not filled with stuff out here that I'm constantly using anyway. So this wrench rack is a completely different version, and it kind of serves a different purpose because these are different wrenches. These are ratcheting wrenches. They actually have an articulating head on the end as well. This rack looks a little different. I made it so that the heads would just slide into that slot and then they would fold down, and then the magnet is here and holds the body of the wrench here. So, they stay in there like that. And then you can mount this on the wall. I actually figured out something pretty cool. This is a game changer. And you all know what that is, right? That is for the French cleat wall. This is just a little jig. That's just a piece of metal. Just cut that and stuck it in here. Now you can just hang this on your French cleat wall. And guess what? All right, so now I'm going to take my little jig here. Okay, I got my little locking key that goes in here. If you haven't seen that video, you should probably check it out. So now this isn't going anywhere. But what's awesome about this is now, with all my wrench racks, now they can be mounted anywhere you want to put them on your French cleat wall. you know. And so these are always at hand, real easy, put back. You can see exactly which wrench you want to grab for. But that's the beauty of this little modular system here. But guess what? You can put it anywhere you want on your French cleat wall too. That's the big secret here with the wrench racks. Combining them with the French cleat jig so you can mount them anywhere you want on your French cleat wall. Okay, so that's it in a nutshell. Why I'm calling this the best DIY wrench rack you've ever seen. And you know, if you want to see how I built these things, just stick around. I'm going to go through some of the strategies I use to figure out the fastest and easiest way to make these things. And you can follow along with those instructions or come up with something totally totally unique for your own builds. Okay, so here's the rack you want to build. Here are the wrenches you want to put in the rack. Dirty. Anyway, so what's the best way to go about this? You know, I've tried a couple different scenarios. I tried, you know, just gluing a piece down and like, you know, plowing out these channels for the wrenches to go in. That didn't work all that well because every wrench has a different thickness. And so you're dealing with measuring each individual wrench and trying to get this spacing just right so it fits in there smoothly but not too loose and not too tight. So that wasn't working. So here's the second or third rack I built. And so you can, one thing you'll notice here is all of these dividers are the same exact width. And I found that to be, everything worked better when I did it that way. This first rack I built, I had varying widths, and this became super tedious, just not the way to do it. So figure out you know, what your total width is of all your tools. You also have to figure out how wide to make this. So what I did is, you're going to make each rack, it's going to fit your specific set of tools, because Craftsman wrench is different than a Cobalt wrench, and vice versa, and all the way down the line. So thicknesses, heights, all that stuff is going to vary from one tool set to the next. So you do have to build these things specifically for the tool set you have. So what you want to do is like figure out how many tools or wrenches you're going to put in this particular rack. I wouldn't advise putting like a gigantic set because it gets heavy. These go from, I think, 7mm to 18mm. Now, what I would do is I would take the 18mm and I would get a thickness on that. And then I would take the 7mm and get a thickness on that. So you got the thinnest and then you got the thickest. You add those two together and then divide it by 2. And that's going to give you the average width of all of your tools, right? They're just going to gradually get bigger. So it makes sense to take the smallest, the biggest, add them together, divide it by 2, and that's going to be the general average of them all. So then you'll take however many tools you're putting in here. In this case, I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11. I have 12 tools in this rack. So I'd take that average value, multiply it by 12, okay? All right, so you figure out the total width of the tools by taking the biggest and then the smallest, adding them together, dividing it by 2, multiplying it by the amount of, or total number of wrenches. Then you're going to add to that the width of all these spacers, right? So I have 12 tools. I'm going to have 13 spacers, right? Because there's an extra one on the end. So these spacers, I believe, are 5/8. Let me see if I recall. Yeah, 5/8. So all these spacers are 5/8. So multiply 5/8 times 13 and add it to the total I got of 12 times my average tool width. And that's how wide or, you know, long your tool or your wrench rack's going to be. You'll notice that I have 2 different angles. Like this rack is cut on an angle here and a different angle here, right? And so, but obviously as the tools get smaller, this distance shrinks. All right, so when you get down to the smallest one over here, all right, you can see it's much closer to the bottom here than this one was. And you want these things to have space for the head. So what's the best way to go about doing this? Okay, so here's your piece of plywood that you're going to make the back out of, right? And you have this dimension right here, which is the length of it, which is X, right? So that's your 13 spacers times your 5/8 plus your 12 tools times the average width of the tool. And that's going to give you this dimension right here. All right, now what I would do is generally add like 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch, because if you're a little bit long, you can cut like the 3/8 off inches, 1/4 inch off each side to get it exactly right at the end. But right now, this is what we're doing. We size that and we get your number here. Now you take your tallest wrench, which is your biggest wrench, and you measure. If you take a look at this thing, you want the bottom of that piece of plywood. So let me show you right here. You want the bottom of this plywood to hit right about here. So you'll measure that distance, okay? And then you'll mark it right here on your little diagram. Then you'll take your shortest wrench, which is right here, and then you measure how far, where you want the piece to hit, get that height, and then you'll mark it like right here. Then you just draw your line, with a straight edge right here. You could just cut this out and put it on a piece on top of your plywood and mark it that way, or you could do the math, whatever you want to do. But that's how you get the bottom angle, and then you just do the same thing for the top, and then you draw your angle. And so that's how you get your two angles. You can cut this thing out if you want, put it on your piece of plywood, or mark it, trace it over, whatever you want to do, and then cut your piece of plywood. Okay, so you've cut out the back piece of plywood, okay? And now you've cut all these strips at 5/8 of an inch. So you have a bunch of pieces, and then you can rough cut them to a little bit longer than what these lengths are going to be here on your drawing. Just rough cut them a little bit longer, because you'll cut those off later, flush all at once. But you do want all these things cut to the proper width and thickness. I don't know what I used. Looks like I used about 3/4 of an inch, I think it is. But you can do whatever you want. And then I'm going to take one wrench, put it in the spot, and then I'm going to use like anything you want. I used like a piece of sandpaper folded over, and I would just like make that as the spacer between the wrench, and then I would grab the next spacer, bring it over, put a little dab of glue on the back, and then brad nail it into the front. Grab the next wrench, put it here, put the spacer in front of the wrench, grab the next spacer, put it in here with some glue, tack it down with some brads, and just grabbing each wrench one at a time, tacking it, gluing it, tacking it, gluing it, using this as a spacer. So you'll have something that is going to fit properly. So when you go to put your wrench in there, you got a little bit of room for it to move, but it's not sloppy. You got this piece all set up. You got to cut the grooves to drop the magnets in the back. The first thing you want to do is cut all the long ends off the tops and bottoms so that they match this angle that you cut off. So you'll just go over to the table saw and use your little taper jig and run this through the table saw, cleaning everything up on the proper angle that we got when we drew this on the piece of paper. Then you have this piece looking pretty much like this, but now we got to put the magnets in the back. So we'll just flip this piece over. We'll set up either a dado, or you could just run it through a regular blade like 2 times, or just so you get the thickness right. Just run that right along the fence upside down like this, cutting that groove, and you want to make sure that the height of the blade comes up just the thickness of this plywood. So